Oh, come on! James, what time is it?
Well, relax. It has only been 5 minutes since you last asked me.
What? Dr. Blue was supposed to see me 45 minutes ago. What's taking him so long?
Dr. Blue always takes this long with his patients. It's why he's so expensive. He is very thorough. You said it was serious, so I told you we're not going to go to some crappy white-green bulk build clinic.
Well, it's a good thing one of us earns enough money for private health insurance. And you're sure he'll believe I'm you just because I'm wearing your clothes?
Yeah, look, he's distracted most of the time, so as long as you don't, interrupt his vibe, he won't notice a thing. You listening to me? Walt, you need to let him...
Can you hear that? I know that song. Yo, listen up, here's a story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. What the hell?
Walt, keep it going, now.
And all day and all night and everything he sees is just blue, like him, inside and outside. This is so strange. James, are you alright?
This song, it's about me. It's beautiful. I really got you that time. Was it the clutching my pearls?
It was. I'm so sensitive about this. Please.
I really relate to Dr. Blue.
He's a little blue guy in a blue world. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I am your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, we know what is going to happen very, very soon. There's going to be a transmission of some kind that's going to tell us what we're going to tell all of you lovely people.
The transmission will probably come from someone who looks a lot like those guys in the video clip for I'm Blue by Eiffel 65.
But before we get to that transmission, I did want to remind you guys, if you love what the Get Commanded podcast is doing, helping you have better games of Commander, and you want to support what we're doing, well, there is no other better way to do it than by going to our Patreon page. It's got some really, really good benefits. There's a bunch of things that you can do, like play games with us, get deck advice from us.
Yep, even request a transmission. You can become a Space Commander yourself.
Yes, it's a very prestigious honor. All you got to do is pay the Patreon website some money.
Oh, just money. That's all you gotta do.
But look, you can check out all of those awesome benefits at patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast. But Walt, should we get to the blinking green light?
The light is blinking. We do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
The ideal length of a Commander game is shorter than you may think, and you should take steps to reduce your average game time.
Short, sharp, to the point.
Yep.
Like our games should be.
Yes.
I like the efficiency
see.
in the Space Commander's command really outline their position.
I
on
see.
It, I think.
It's poetic almost. So they want us to have shorter Commander games.
Well, I don't think they want us to have shorter Commander games, but I reckon what they're doing is collating a bunch of data from Commander games in general.
Right.
And I think they're seeing Commander games just get longer and longer.
They did say the ideal Commander game is shorter than you may think. They also didn't give us a time that they... So I guess maybe we'll get to that, of what we think the ideal Commander length is.
I've got some opinions.
Yeah. I guess we should probably cover, there are a bunch of reasons that I have heard people say they hope for shorter Commander games. I guess, what are the kind of things that stop us from enjoying those really long games? Because we've all talked about, and we've talked about on this podcast before, those 3-4 hour long games that we've played, the epic battles where there's 5 board wipes.
Some of them are incredible to play through, and
Absolutely.
some of them I'd love to sit through longer and longer, but like, there comes a point where, like, I don't know, like, I'll get hungry, for example,
Yeah.
and I'll just want to leave so I can eat some food that I haven't touched in like 2, 3, 4 hours.
You know what we like more than playing Commander? Eating food.
Yes.
That one's kind of a requirement.
Wait for the next podcast. Get culinary.
I mean, in a similar vein, like something that we need to do, I've played late night games where I have eventually needed to sleep. If it goes late enough, I got to do that.
I have played many Commander games with you where it gets to a point where you look like you're falling asleep at the table.
Yeah.
So
I do get like that.
Yeah, but like, look, this is the thing. We're all like, unfortunately, we're not 16 and in high school anymore playing Commander at 3:30 where just after school. We're adults now. We work, we have commitments, we have to find time. So usually we invite, the way I usually do it is invite people round, I'll cook them dinner or something, and then we'll play some Commander. But then, we're adults. We need to get home. We need to sleep so we can go to work the next day.
we don't have endless time. And in a similar vein, actually, we play a lot of our games at a game store out in Greensboro, hence Greensboro Commander Community. And the store closes pretty strictly at 10 p.m. So
I have to often at times tell people to take a photo with a board state in your hand and play at home later.
Yeah, get out of here. So we have had games that have gone so long where we're pushing that 10 p.m. mark. It's 10:05, 10:07, and the guy working the counter, our very good friend Luke, starts to turn off the lights in the store just to be like, guys, please, I know, I love Commander, you love Commander, go home.
I desperately want to leave this store. Yes. I've been here. Luke's been there for a lot longer than we have. So.
Somehow I don't think he gets paid that extra 7 minutes either. I have a funny feeling he's paid till 10 and everything after that is optional.
Shout out to Luke and all other local game store owners that just let the players finish the game. Honestly, big shout out to if you're letting us finish a game that you can see is ending soon. I love it when game store owners do that.
100%.
So what are some other things that would make us want to end the game?
I mean, we have only a certain amount of time in a week to play Commander, and I often have multiple decks I'd like to play, and sometimes just based on the time people have available or the store closing, by the time you finish that one really long game, you can't even get in another one, and I'd much rather play 2 shortish games than one really long one. Are you in the same boat on that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we both have a lot of decks, and we would generally like to be able to play test the different strategies or the edits that we've made to decks recently.
Yeah.
But even on the topic of preferring to playing 2 to 1, a great example would be attention spans.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not super long. My partner is currently going through the process of looking for an ADHD diagnosis.
Yeah.
And they've admitted to me multiple times that it gets to a certain point in Commander where there's so many things on the battlefield and the board state's complicated. They just cannot focus for longer than a certain time period. But if a game ends, then they can go get a drink, reset, come back with a fresh pair of eyes for a new game.
Yeah.
And I think that my attention span is probably not as bad as my partner's, but I would not be able to sit there for that long. I do the naughty dog kind of falling asleep at the table thing. And I love being able to end a game, have the rule infinity conversation that we love so well, and then play another game that's probably going to be better balanced because of the conversation.
Definitely. Well, sometimes you can be caught in those long games and they're games in which your deck is just not doing it either. And so...
And you just have to sit and watch your friends have fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's the ultimate test of your attention, really, is when it's okay, I don't get to do any participation. I'm just a spectator in this game.
That is one very strong reason I want a game to end.
Yeah, absolutely. How long do you reckon it is before you start... No, I'm not going to say this is ideal game length, but how long do you reckon you get into a game of Commander where you start going, all right, it'd be good if it started finishing now? Because I think for me... If I'm sitting there, we're playing, it's a good game, things are going well, I reckon after about 90 minutes, I start going I'm sort of itching for the next game
that's
here.
An hour and a half, you reckon?
Well, just it sounds like a lot of time, but based on just checking the watch when I'm playing.
And often, when you start looking at
that's
the
when
time,
I start looking at my watch.
Okay.
It's often about 90 minutes. And it sounds again, a long amount of time, but in a game, often that's turn 10, someone's board wiped for the second time. you're just like drawing your 10th card or whatever. That's roughly when I find I start going like, oh, I kind of wish the next game would start now.
I reckon mine's even shorter than that.
Yeah?
I reckon I get about 60 minutes in. I reckon now an hour, and
That's
I
fair.
start getting a bit like, what are you doing? What's the next phase going to look like? Is anyone getting a win? Like, that's the when I start looking at the clock, or even looking at the drinks fridge at the local game store and finding an excuse to leave the table or something like that.
I never thought about that you do often duck off for a drink. I suppose it's a good like reset of like attention and
it's also one of those things where you can walk away and then, when you're looking at, for example, a puzzle and you take a step back and then like leave it for a while and then come back with a fresh pair of eyes and you see the thing you've never seen before.
You don't get the blinders on. You're not like missing key information anymore. Yeah, you totally get that in a Commander game. Yeah. You're like literally like, sometimes you got like laser eyes on that one singular card that's stopping you from doing it. It's like someone's got like a deafening silence and you're like, I can't cast that unless I get rid of that card.
And it's the blind obedience effect as well. Yeah. It's like everything's coming in tapped. I could just end the game if it wasn't coming in tapped.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a thing. I respect that. 60 minutes actually sounds pretty reasonable. And I think when we get into our like actual ideal amount of time, I might be closer to there. But I think it's also worth mentioning here, we are talking about shortening games and that in general we like to do it.
But there's probably a point where it's like, too short is not fun, right?
Definitely. I mean, we talked before about how, ending the game out of nowhere with like an infinite combo or something, how much that's sort of produced a bit of salt in us. So we're kind of going like, oh man, I wish like this sort of isn't the game I signed up for.
Yeah.
When I was having that Rule Zero conversation, I wish you'd said, oh, by the way, there's this 2-card combo.
One of which is my commander.
Yeah, and the game will be over if I get to that. Like, there's definitely such thing as too short, and I think it's something around those infinite combos.
Yeah, I also kind of, like, I like a bit of banter at the table. I genuinely, and also banter can lead to politics happening in game. And I think, and I love sitting in those. And I think that does extend game time a little bit when things that aren't rules in Magic the Gathering kind of come into it, which is conversation or stuff like that. And I have often sat down at tables at game stores that I'm not a local at, or, playing with people that I'm not familiar with. And gameplay runs as if it's like a modern tournament. Yeah. And it's like, I play this fetch line, I crack it, I'm going to shock in Steam Vents, I'm going to cast this Ragavan, alright, pass turn. And you're like, whoa, I don't know. You didn't say monkey to Ragavan. Like, that's every time I cast Ragavan, I'll say monkey, and everyone will laugh at the table.
Yeah.
That kind of extends it a little bit. And I actually hate sitting in games that people are just like robots and I'm not saying I hate you if you play like a robot, because honestly, you're probably laser focused and a way better Magic player than I am. But when you're in Commander, you're playing the social format of Magic the Gathering, and I think there's something to say about games going for a length of time in Commander because of it being the social format.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that, but you're totally right. Like, there's sort of there's kind of a social contract of socializing.
Yes.
Right? Like, we're actually signing up for a certain length of time with people.
Yeah. When you sit down at the Commander table, you're basically saying, look, I want to spend the next, like, up to 60 minutes with you, specifically with you. And I'd like to know, and like we've said it on this podcast before, your deck is like a reflection of yourself. It's a bit of an artistic creation. So it's like, show me what your deck does and why it does it and why it links to you.
And you need that time to actually see the deck properly.
Yeah. So I think when you play like really short games where you play like a robot or like an AI playing Magic the Gathering, you go, okay, amazing, you won the game, but it's been like 5 minutes and I don't know why you chose that as your commander.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
When I sit down, like, part of my Rule Zero conversation would be like, okay, this is my Abomination Llanowar deck. I actually won this, won with this in a draft of Commander Legends back when that came out. And I'll do like the little explanation of the deck, and people that do Rule Zero conversations like, I'm playing Jora, Cheerios, I'm going to storm out and I'm going to win.
Yeah.
What's your name? Sorry. Like, who are you? Which Joy are you playing?
Yeah.
The Cheerios one. Oh, right, cool.
Right, I was here to get some... I thought you were a lawyer. Why are you pulling out your Jordan? I suppose it's also worth mentioning here as well that like all of this is applying to casual specifically,
Yes.
right? Like CDH games, 100%, there's an expectation going into it that they can end in 10 minutes. And I know a lot of people, that's the appeal of
Yes.
CDH. It's like, actually, when I have 2 hours set aside, I want to play 4 games. That's my goal when I set aside 2 hours of my week for Commander.
100%. Honestly, I have a play group. I've spoken about them on this podcast before. They frequently listen as well. Ben, Matt, and Brad. Shout out to you guys. Because we, as a play group, the 4 of us, generally what we'll do is we will play 4 games of CDH.
Yeah.
So those 4 games could generally go from like 10 minutes to an hour long each.
Yeah.
And then we'll close it out with a casual game. But because we're in a bit of more of a CDH mindset, we'll play through the modes a bit quicker. And then when we get to like turn 6 or 7, where it's about, people are trying to win on those turns, like 8, 9, that's when we'll have a little bit more fun with it, and it will close the night on this kind of jovial, fun time.
Nice.
So, like, I play a lot of CDH, and I see the appeal. I play a control combo deck. I want to win as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I see the appeal of these quick games, but in a casual format, I would like to experience it for at least a good period of time where I feel like I'm having fun with my opponents, and it's not like
seeing the deck play out.
Yeah, and it's not it's not like you're seeing it as a sparring partner. You're not just going in training and getting out. You're actually having a good time with them.
Definitely. But all that said, okay, so we don't want to be too short. But obviously the focus of the Space Commanders was we don't want to go too long, the episode.
So what's our bracket?
Yeah, what's the sweet spot? Like when you're thinking, okay, ideal Commander game, because this is what they said, the ideal game length, where does it sit for you? Because I think for me, I reckon the minimum amount of time I'd like to spend in a Commander game is probably like 40 minutes.
And we're talking casual again here.
Yeah, all casual here.
Taking CDH out of the conversation.
Yeah,
again.
I think 40 minutes as a good minimum. Like I think a good game should go for at least that long. And I think for me, the maximum is that amount of time when I start to have my focus go funny and start falling asleep and wanting food, 90 minutes. So I think for me, 40 to 90 minutes. I'll say that and then also say I think it's better if it's closer to that hour mark. So if we're going to go somewhere in that range, I'd actually rather go on the low end of that range, not the 90 minutes, if I can help it.
100%. I reckon I'm pretty much with you. I think I wouldn't like it going over maybe an hour and 10 minutes. I think that would be like minutes. My top out. Yep. The only reason why I said earlier that like 60 minutes is when I start checking my watch is because I'll start checking my watch if I can tell the game isn't going to end soon.
Right.
But if I'm playing a game of Commander and I can see the end coming, I almost forget that time exists because I'm excited to see what happens.
You're definitely someone who gets in the zone. Like when you can
in the end game of Commander as well.
When you can see all the possibilities in front of you, that's the classic James, look at hand, look at board state, look at hand, put hand down, shuffle closer to the table, start untapping.
Well, I mean, I was the other night, we were at Commander Night, and I was playing my Tornos deck, and I had to get up to get a drink.
Exactly what I had in my mind.
It was literally, so for instance, like the board state was just horrific, but our opponent, it was a player called Brenton. We'd never played with them before. Incredible player. Shout out to them. They were playing a what list was it? It was like an artifacts list. One of the new precons.
It's the blue-white vehicles one.
Shurikai.
It was Shurikai, but and then we asked immediately, we were like, is this the like super optimized, crazy, high-powered Shurikai? And he was like, no, it's vehicles.
There is a lot of vehicles, and honestly, it was like still incredibly good. That Commander,
strong. It was an upgraded precon, and like upgraded.
Because if you don't know Shurikai is like a vehicle as a commander, which is insane.
So it's a 4-mana, the vehicle is an 8/8, so if you can crew it, but you pay a generic mana and tap him, and you can draw 2 cards and discard a card.
Which is card draw, because you go up a card.
You do.
It's wild.
But you also make a pilot that's a 1/1, but it says it may crew vehicles as though its power 2 greater.
So it crews for 3. Yeah. It's insane.
So normally these 1/1 pilots are, in the typical Shurikai list, they're just like fodder for Skull Clamp and stuff, like going wide, like whatever. They're kind of irrelevant. But yeah, this was like straight up, yes, it was doing the draw discard thing, but it was mostly like, I need lots of pilots to crew these 10 vehicles.
And they were like really good vehicles too. They were coming in, drawing them cards, getting them value and all this kind of stuff. So we were looking down the barrel of like all of these vehicles, which The cool thing about vehicles that I realized in this game was that the fact that they turn into artifacts, non-creatures, at the end of turn.
Yeah.
So board wiping
doesn't work.
does nothing.
You have to destroy all the artifacts. Otherwise, if you destroy all creatures, yes, and pilots go. But it's like, yeah, cool, I get my pilots back to where we were before.
So we were sat there, I was playing my Torno's artifact list, so I definitely didn't have an artifact board wipe in my deck, and I was like, how do I stop this? This is insane. And as I went to go get a drink from like the fridge, that was probably about the 60-minute mark as well,
I reckon probably, yeah.
As I started walking, I came back and I looked at my hand again, put them down on the table, and I looked at you and I said, I think we're okay.
Oh, that's right, you did.
And then when something happened, I was like paying for my drink at the counter, and I think maybe you or Abe said, James, come back, something's happening. And I came down and I did this weird sequence of plays where I managed to copy the ability of Dragon Spark Reactor, which is a weird charge counter burn spell.
It deals an amount of damage to a creature and a player.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can copy that activated ability with Torno.
But I managed to copy it like twice because of Patriarch
I think
Seal.
it was like 4 times.
Anyway,
or something crazy.
I got him with Exaxes.
Yeah.
Exaxes damage.
Lethal on the stack as well as instant speed. Yeah.
It was very satisfying.
It was a great play.
It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, if this game, I couldn't see an end to it. Like, if he wasn't about to win, I would be, like, really bored. I would be... Because if he was just, like, you know, generating value and, like, grinding out, and if you were doing the same thing, or if multiple board wipes were happening and no one was getting anywhere, I'd be like, oh my god, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But because he was threatening ending the game at about that 60-minute mark...
And you could threaten to kill him as well.
I was so engaged.
Yeah.
I was, like, actively engaged in that game, even at the mark where I'm usually like starting to get tired of playing.
I think it's probably kind of obvious to all you out there, but yes, the length of the game, obviously, the ideal length of the game obviously depends a lot on how good the game is going. So if it's going really well and it goes really long, that's okay.
100%.
But in an ideal world, how long should they go for?
Like we mentioned before, we've played games that are like 3 hours, but they're so gripping and thrilling.
Oh, and they're interactive all the way through. Everyone's getting close to winning. Like, yeah, those are definitely great. So for you reckon 60 minutes is like...
I reckon 40 to maybe 1 hour and 10 is my bracket. That's my ideal.
Minutes. Yeah,
40
I respect
to 70.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not too far from mine. It's just like slightly shorter on the high
We're
end,
aiming for that like finishing, closing at the hour mark.
About an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, but fully acknowledging there that probably, and this was the focus I think of the Space Commanders, there's going to be some steps we'll have to take to get the game down to that length, because a lot of our games are going way longer than that.
I was just going to ask, like, I'm experiencing longer Commander games at the moment. I reckon on average my Commander games are going for at least an hour and a half. Like, at least is what I'm saying.
Yeah. My last few games have been close to the 2 hour mark, I think. And that's too long.
And that's even over Spell Table, where where you're like trying to push people to play.
Yeah.
And, you know,
less distractions.
Less conversation happening at Spell Table.
So I think this next half of the episode should probably be all about getting those games shorter.
How we make them shorter. Well,
exactly.
I mean, look, we've only been talking for 22 minutes, but in the spirit of the episode...
Keeping it short. Sure.
Should we have a bit of a thrifty interlude?
Let's have a thrifty interlude. So, yes, we do have lots left to cover, but before that, we'll hear a little something about a new thrifty card. And as is tradition, I will be bringing this card to life in monologue form this week. James, would you like to read the card we're featuring?
I sure would, because it is one of my favourite cards in my Tornos deck.
Hey.
It's Shimmermere. For 3 generic mana, you'll get an artifact creature Mere that's a 2/2 with flash, and it says you can cast artifact spells as though they had flash.
Ever wanted to threaten people? Not attack, just threaten? Look no further than this tiny, angry robot! Oh, your friend wants to give the turn to you like a lovely, polite gamer? Not bloody yet! First, allow me to flash you a fine assortment of shiny wares. Surprise treasure chest, surprise bauble, surprise closet! Actually, no surprise closets, please. We're done with those, am I right? Your opponents will be saying, I haven't been this shocked to see a sword since that time my parents took me to the circus. Get budgeted!
Man, that cow merchant, like, I feel like Shimimi is like the perfect thing for him to be selling because he'd just run up to you on the street, flash his cloak, and just throw like trinkets
Surprise
and stuff.
closet. Yeah.
Something I've thought about with this card, and I'm like really hyped on because of a recent episode we just did.
Yeah.
You could play this as your PDH commander.
It's uncommon.
It's uncommon.
Whoa.
How sick would that? You know, like Urza's Battlethopter? You could
Budget
basically
Urza's
play
Battlethopter?
a pauper version of Urza's Battlethopter.
Artifact control. That's wild.
I love it.
You can check out these weird things as text posts when they're released every Thursday in our Discord in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. And you can also see us bring some of these to video form over on TikTok at Get Commanded. So chuck us a follow to see those as we post them.
We're pretty hyped to get on the TikTok platform more and more and more. We're doing our best to get in there. But let's get back to the topic at hand because we should be making sure this episode's cohesive and to the point.
And short. Most importantly.
So we've talked about, like, you know, why we'd want to finish games. We've talked about, you know, how things can distract us or things like that. But
and how long we want them to go
how
for.
long we want them to be, where the range is.
Yep.
So now let's talk about some ways we can actually get to a quicker end to the game of Commander.
For sure. Definitely really important. I guess the important thing to keep in mind through all of this is that we only really have control over our own section of the game, right?
Correct. We're one of 4 players.
Yeah. So in general, it's not going to be a good idea for me to be going, James, hurry up. What are you going to do? James, make a decision.
I said we're one of 4 players, but realistically, we're 2 out of 4.
Our collective power is greater.
50% of the Commander game is just us.
It's just us. It's so good. So yes, you're in control of your own game. So in my opinion, there's sort of 2 main things that you can reduce. 2 main techniques you can use to reduce the length of the game.
Sure.
One of them is the length of your turns. Right?
That makes a lot of sense. That's when you have, like, the most amount of priority.
Yeah.
You're going to be, you know, you'll be thinking in those times. So, like, reducing that amount of time is going to help overall reduce the amount of gameplay.
Yes. And you can also reduce the length of your game plan. So this is kind of if the turns are the micro part of the pie chart, the length of your game plan is the macro.
That's the step back and see the mosaic as a full picture. Yeah, I like it.
Exactly right. So, reducing the length of our turns is the first one there.
Sure.
So, in my opinion, there's like 2 main things we can do to reduce the length of our turns. One's a big one. I've noticed some people don't do it, and I definitely do. So, I'm telling you all out there, Space Commanders included, do this. Plan your turn before you untap.
Oh my god, I have opinions on this. You're right to let me spew for a little bit.
Spew away.
Okay, I'm so glad you mentioned this because I have seen so many times people, like, finish their turn, put their cards face down, their hand face down on the table, and not pick it up until their next turn. And I'm like, you either have an incredible eidetic memory, or you are just not caring about the game. And I know it's the latter because when it gets to their turn, they will pick their hand up and they'll go, oh, I totally forgot I had this card. That changes what I want to do. And then they'll say phrases like, ooh, and oh, what if I did this? And, like, mutter to themselves with those phrases. And honestly, as someone, and you said you plan your turns as well. I am literally going as the turns go round. So I'll pass the turn and some, you know, player A will do something. Excuse you. And I'll go, player A will do something. Okay, well, now I'll plan my turn accordingly and I'll go down this line.
Yeah.
Player B will do something and I'll go, right, it doesn't really change much, but it might affect the way I cast this spell or when I cast this spell. Then player C will do something and it won't change anything. So I'll now have an exact line of what I want to do and deploy my turn pretty efficiently.
Yep.
I hate it. Hate it. When someone sits in the tank for like 10 minutes and then goes, actually, the best thing for me is to hold up mana and pass. I'm like, how did you not know that was the best thing? Like, I'm sorry, you had your hand for an entire 3 players' turn and you couldn't have come up with that conclusion sooner. I love every Commander player to bits. but I will love you more if you plan ahead. I'm sorry. This was a big pet peeve of mine, personally.
I totally agree with you. I think it's definitely something that all of us can do very easily to improve this exact problem, the length of the game. I guess it's worth considering, like, the card that you draw when you move to your turn, right? In the context of the game, it's actually a pretty small effect on what you can do in your turn.
Yeah.
Most of what your turn can be depends on the stuff you already have on the battlefield, i.e. lands, mana rocks, creatures, etc.
And the sequence of spells you could play out from your hand.
Already. Yeah,
Yes.
the cards that are already in your hand.
Correct.
Look, sometimes you will draw that card and go, oh, that changes everything. It does happen.
Yeah, it
totally
could be like a
does
board
happen.
wipe or something. You know, like,
Yeah.
is this the best thing to board wipe? But there's some like really easy questions to ask yourself on other people's turns.
Yes, to plan ahead.
That
Yeah.
can help you plan ahead. Like, you should be asking yourself, what is my priority right now?
Yeah.
Is my priority to get my game plan further ahead, or is it to threat assess my opponents and kill them?
I've definitely seen this done wrong in the context that sometimes people don't understand. Like, some people are aware that they need to board wipe, aren't seemingly aware of the fact that, like, lethal is on board, i.e. if they don't find a board wipe this turn, they just lose.
Yep.
And they spend their turn doing sort of what they would do if it was like 2 turns earlier, like get set up for the next turn. And it's like, no, the game's gonna end if you don't find a board wipe. So literally every card in your hand that is not a board wipe is irrelevant, except the card draw. How do you draw cards? Do you have bloods on your field? Do you have, a card that says pay 3 mana, draw a card on it? Like, all of that, those are your only avenues now. Ignore every other thing. You need to board wipe. Find the board wipe.
Even if it's like sacrifice a creature, draw cards. If you're like,
sacrifice a creature, scry 1.
Yes.
Scry till you get it on top of your library.
Exactly. Even because if you do the math and you go, right, it's lethal even with all the blockers I have.
Yeah.
Then you can be like, all right, if I deploy all the blockers I have in my hand, do I have enough blocks? No? Well, now your creatures are irrelevant.
Yes. It's board wipe
Find
time.
the board wipe.
Find the board wipe.
And like, it's even like in other situations where it's not a creature-based threat assessment. Have a look. If you're a go-wide strategy, for example, and you're going, right, I'm going to like progress my board plan and da-da-da-da-da, but one opponent's got a ghostly prison and you're playing your sphere of safety in your enchantment deck, I'm like, well, I can't attack anyone because I need to pay like 2 mana for each attacking creature. I can't swing wide. That's not my game plan. I need to go find my removal.
Yeah.
Or I need to find an alternative win con to get around this. You can ask yourselves these questions, and even some situations where you're like, okay, nothing's threatening me at the moment. No one's got lethal. No one's got any threats. Okay, what's my next step? Is this a turn where I deploy a win con, or is this a turn where I need to set up some more?
Yeah.
What are the best things for me to put on the battlefield to set me up so next turn I can really go off?
Or even if the decision is literally just like, man, the options I have in my hand are actually not very good, but I have a card draw spell. Even if the only plan you're making on other people's turns is, when I untap, I'm going to cast that card draw spell, that's still a plan. And that will actually, it's still not untap, upkeep, draw. It's like, I know at least the direction my turn's going to take. Because we're not saying know exactly every aspect of the turn. Someone might remove something. Someone might block in a way you don't expect. Those things do happen. But know at least what the beginning of your turn, the idea of it is, before you untap.
Yeah, and generally, if that first card that you draw for turn does change things, my advice would be to give everyone a bit of an awareness that, I need to think for a hot second.
Yeah.
Because this does actually change things. But if 99% of the time it won't. So you should have a pretty good idea of what that turn will look like.
Definitely. And that's going to be, in my opinion, probably the number one way you can reduce the length of your turns. Know what they're going to look like in advance. The other thing you can do to reduce the length of your turns, and this is actually also going to have a huge impact on your mental capacity, reduce the complexity of your board state. Now, this is more of a deck building one, I would say. I don't think you can really necessarily do this in the course of the game.
That would be like choosing not to cast something when it would be objectively the right thing to do.
So I think we can call this the Cathar's Crusade effect.
Oh my god, I hate that card so much.
Because this is probably the absolute most egregious example of this.
Can you just explain what Cathar's Crusade does for someone that doesn't know?
It's a 5-mana enchantment that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on each creature you control.
Now, I want to explain why this is an absolute pain in the ass. Because when you put a +1 counter on each creature you control when a creature enters, you might have some creatures with +1 counters on them already. So they only tick up by 1.
Yep.
But then the creature that just entered only gets 1 counter, right? So you need 4 dice to represent the difference. Then you cast another creature, and that creature will need its own dice to put on. And then you
None of them are the same.
And then you cast a spell like Deploy to the Front, for example, and you make a bunch of tokens. Now you need 1 billion dice because each one of those is going to have a different... Oh my god. It's just this snowball effect of you have to represent like 6 tokens that are the same with different +1 counters on them.
Yeah.
All at different points. It is just a pain in the ass. And every creature you cast is going to make you groan because you're going to have to reach over your board state and turn every single dice. It's a pain in the ass.
It's so frustrating. Tokens are definitely the worst one for it, but unfortunately, it's the best way to use the card. Like the objective best way to do this is have lots of creatures, and this is exactly what's going to cause you to pull your hair out.
There's some new cards that I've started saying were made for Arena because they're so
difficult to keep track of in paper. Yeah.
For example, one of my mate's favorite cards, Brad's favorite card to ever be printed, is Crystalline Giant. Crystalline Giant, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you randomly choose one of 12 different keywords. And then you put a keyword counter on Crystalline Giant.
However, you can't choose a keyword you've already chosen.
So, you need to roll a d12 for the first time, then...
A D11?
That doesn't exist. So you need to roll a D12 and hope you don't get the same number.
And this is the other thing. Like, the way that you normally do it is you number off, like, the keywords as they're written on the card, right? So you go, like, okay, 1 is the first one, 2 is the second, etc.
Whatever,
But the thing is, the only way you can identify which one it is to count through every single word in that card. So sometimes you roll a 12 and you're like, oh, cool. And then you count through
1,
every
2,
single
3,
word.
4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, I already have that. Roll again.
So look, Crystalline Giant, funny card, but made for Arena.
Yeah.
Like, the computer does it by itself. You don't have to worry about it. But in real life physical Commander, that is just a pain. It's so annoying.
Well, there's going to be an enormous amount of mental, like, taxing that's going to happen to you to have to keep track of these cards. But also, it's going to take so long. This is the point of the episode, right? The amount of time you spend just resolving that trigger is so long that you should just play a different card. Play anything else.
Yeah.
I'm calling it the Kathos Crusade effect. There's a few different cards that sort of fit into this category of, like, okay, they're going to slow down your turn. I think the big category I have here, not saying don't play them sparingly, cards that say whenever on them.
Okay, so these are like triggered abilities that say whenever something happens, do something else. Now, usually the key with these cards that have triggered abilities is to include them in decks where that ability is going to trigger a lot. Because it's going to be valuable. For example, like Blood Artist in an Aristocrats deck. This is a whenever card, and you run this in your Aristocrats list.
I do.
Because it says whenever a creature dies, you deal 1 damage to any opponent, and you gain a life.
Yeah.
That is a really good effect when your whole game plan is sacrificing a bunch of creatures over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So that in an Aristocrats deck is incredible.
Yeah.
However, if you're running Blood Artist alongside another version of a Blood Artist effect, like, what's another good...
Falconwrath Noble.
Falconwrath Noble, same thing. But then there's other effects that say it does it to each opponent, for example.
Cutthroat, but it only triggers on your creatures.
Exactly. Do you see the effect?
Yeah.
So, like, you have 1 Blood Artist, a Zulaport Cutthroat, and a Falconwrath Noble. So every time a creature dies... You have to deal 1 damage to any player and gain a life from Blood Artist. You have to deal 1 damage to any player and gain a life from Falconwrath Noble. And then each opponent loses 1 life because of Zulaport Cutthroat, and you gain a life. But then if a creature dies on someone else's board...
Only 2 of them trigger.
Only 2 of them will trigger.
Cutthroat.
Just explaining that has taken me 30 seconds.
It's a lot of time. And I think the other thing that happens here is that, like, it's really worth mentioning. Blood Artist, you have to choose a player for each of those triggers.
It's a target, yes.
Yeah, and it's pretty rare that you know for sure which player has to die first.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people go, oh, highest life total. And you do that. And then, like, 5 more triggers resolve, and they don't have the highest life total anymore. You go, you moved my thing before. 3 of them at you. And it's like, just the amount of time, allocating all of these things is so much. Again, it's a really, really good card. Not saying don't play it, but, like, the cumulative effect of having lots of things that say this is your turns will take a really long time. Even Tadiover Benthic Druid
Oh, yeah.
in a landfall deck, this says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. The length of your... In fact, pretty much, I'm going to go out on a limb. The worst examples of the whenever cards are the whenever draw a card cards.
Because then you have to read a whole nother card to see if it affects your game.
And decide if you're going to take a different kind of a turn. This is like actively preventing you from doing the thing we were just talking about of planning your turn in advance, because you're going to go like, okay, I'm going to play this. Oh, draw that. Oh,
does that change anything?
Have I played land yet?
Wait, hang on. If I now cast this, I get 2 more cards. Is that better to see 2 more options, or is it better for me to do what I was planning on doing anyway?
Should I cast a removal spell? Do I need to remove that now? I've got Teddy over.
Why did I play Simic?
That's the big problem, really.
But like, look, whenever cards are cards that are incredibly high value in decks with particular strategies,
definitely,
and you should be playing them. But when we did our deck building template, we said for like enhancers and win cons, and even like if we look at our aristocrats deck building episode that we did, we said what was our max, like 4, 5?
Yeah,
like that's it.
Those aristocrat effects. Yeah,
it's very unlikely that you're going to have all of them on the battlefield at once, and if you are, use it efficiently and win the game.
Yeah. I think the really important thing here is definitely if you're one of those people who doesn't like keeping track of lots of triggers, it sounds really obvious, but stop playing the things that have lots of triggers on them. It will save your brain so much space to not have to think about it anymore.
I'm not going to lie. One of the things that I want to change about my Yeleva deck is all the casting instant sorcery triggers, like Prowess, Magecraft. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, do
Draw
this.
a card.
Sometimes I've had it where I've had like Harmonic Prodigy and Kruk the Thumbless on the battlefield at the same time. Those 2 cards by themselves on a battlefield
bring the game to a standstill.
Oh my god.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some other things that we can do about our board state complexity to make it more efficient?
I think cards that require lots of targets to resolve.
Like spells like Casualties of War?
Casualties of War.
That's a good spell.
It's a good spell. Even Decimate, also a really good spell. But like a lot of the time, the amount of time it takes you to work out which ones you want to get rid of can be really, really draining.
I have to admit, I was in a game the other day where I did cast Casualties of War, and I knew what the enchantment that I wanted to get rid of was.
Yeah.
But then I had to go, oh shit, I didn't actually think about what land, what planeswalker, what creature, what artifact I wanted to hit.
You have to choose each one as well. You can't skip any.
So, like, to be honest, in that game, I knew I definitely 100% was casting Casualties of War to get rid of, it was a Smothering Tithe, to get rid of the Smothering Tithe that was on the battlefield. But I should have gone, okay, what artifact should I hit? What land do I want to get rid of?
What's most threatening?
To be honest, I think I did a really quick job of assessing the board at the time and got rid of what I needed to, but I could have made that turn more efficient by really thinking about my targets.
Well, and I think also, again, if you're someone who finds this kind of stuff really overwhelming, don't play those kinds of cards. The other kind of card that is probably worse than the previous category of lots of targets is cards that take forever to resolve. Like, just by virtue of what they say on them, so much has to happen. Eerie Ultimatum.
I thought you were about to say like Shahrazad or something.
Oh, no. Oh my god, we're not playing Shahrazad. Eerie Ultimatum, Brilliant Restoration. These kind of cards that like just reanimate your entire graveyard.
Oh,
it's just by virtue of how many cards you're likely to have in there if you're going to cast this spell. How many of those have ETB effects?
However many like have to read certain state-based actions like Devotion or like...
whether there's things that have auras in there. Auras
and then you have to choose targets.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a weird effect.
Was that on the battlefield? Could I have enchanted it with that aura? When did I choose? Did that ETB at the same time?
Then there's some situations where you're resolving this spell and you have to go, oh, damn it. Judge? Is there a judge in store? Because I actually don't know how this works.
How many times have you heard the sentence asked to a judge, does that see this happen?
Yes.
And these cards are like the worst examples. You know, did Gary see around me?
Yes.
Did he see... Can he see her? Did he look the right way? Was she around?
He was facing face up. When I cast Ixodron, he was there.
Oh no. Good. Best way to melt a judge's brain. Ixodron.
Oh!
Just say the word Ixodron and see what happens to their face.
Sorry for the headphones listeners that heard me yell so loudly then.
Oh, definitely. So again, we're not saying don't play them. We're just saying the amount of mental energy they take and the length of time in your turns that they take is just going to increase the length of the game. So consider playing fewer of them is my general advice there.
And my advice would be plan around them. If you've got them in your hand, really think about, like, if you've got like a Command the Dreadhorde, for example.
Yeah.
Ask to see people's graveyards.
Ahead of time.
Yeah, it
good.
might give away a little bit of your game plan, but you'll know what you want to target, and you can start doing the math in your head of how much life you're willing to lose for reanimating your opponent's creatures.
That's true. I've definitely done that before and been saved. Well, I've done all the maths before my turn.
And gone, this is exactsies. Trust me, I did the math. Bang.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
100%. Well, the other thing we said we could do, so that was reducing turn time.
Yep.
Great, we've done that.
Now you want to talk about like game plan and the game, like your overall strategy.
Yeah, reduce your game plan length.
Sure.
The first one is the one we've said, I feel like the last 5 episodes in a row, but it's really important. Include more win cons. You need to have at least 4, 3, 5, ideally, win cons in your deck. Specific cards that can bring that game to an end. So not only are like those aristocrat effects are a win con, have Command the Dreadhorde in your deck. A spell that if you resolve it on the right board state, just says, I get there. Those are needed to end those games that are just in a stalemate.
This is very much within the core of the Get Commanded podcast, because our first episode was about ending the game.
It was called Ending the Game, I think. Yeah.
And we advised that you should also look at some win cons that are different to your normal line of strategy. Like you said, for example, what my favorite example to point people to with this is actually in my Firelaf deck.
Yeah.
My Firelaf deck is a go wide deck, right? So it's like making lots of plants when it enters. I can buff them up. Sometimes I'll go tall with one of them and cast Fling. That's an alternative win con.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll cast Overwhelming Stampede and go wide and run over everyone. That's a different win con. Or I run a card like Goblin Bombardment and sacrifice a billion plants and just shoot people down like a machine gun made of seeds.
Yeah. Well, aside from the machine gun made of seeds, I hope you can see that James had like different reasons that each of those cards were there. You know, if there's...
They win in different ways.
And they win around different other cards as well. Like if someone has that Ghostly Prison down your go wide deck, you might need a card like Goblin Bombardment or like...
Fling, like my Fling gets around that as well.
Fling gets around that.
I switch my brain. Okay, go wide strategy turned off. Now if I go tall with a plant and fling it, that'll kill that player and then open up another win con line.
Exactly. If you the inverse, if you're building a go tall kind of deck, yes, you should definitely have your cards like Team of Battle Rage or Mantle of the Ancients is one that sees a lot of play in these Voltron kind of decks.
What's Mantle of the Ancients?
It's a 5-mana aura. When it ETBs, when it attaches to the creature, you can return any number of... I think it's equipment or auras from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. And then I think it gives it +1/+1 for each aura and enchantment.
Oh, that's a win con.
It's just like if...
That's huge.
You know, your board's been wiped a bunch of times, you got like 10 auras in the bin, you got your commander out, and you chuck Mantle of the Ancients on there.
Okay.
All those are going to chuck themselves on, I win.
But what if I'm running Maze of Ith?
If you're running Maze of Ith, I have been enjoying a card called Ram Through recently.
Hot card, like that card.
It's so good. It's a 2-mana instant.
It's 2-mana instant, which can just come out of nowhere.
So it's a bite, so not a fight spell. So fight's the one where 2 creatures deal damage equal to their power to each other outside of combat. Bites are cards where 1 creature deals damage equal to its power to another. So they don't necessarily...
One creature just goes and wails on the other creature.
Yeah, and the other one's not ready. He's not fighting back.
He's like eating a sandwich on a park bench and he just comes out of the dark and just starts wailing on it.
It's the Randy Orton of Magic cards. Weird reference. Ram Through does that, but if the creature has power, if the creature has trample, any excess power that was dealt to that creature is dealt to its controller instead.
Yeah, so for example, like if in that scenario where Walt's playing a Voltron deck and I've got a Maze of Ith, which means I can just untap his Voltron commander whenever I like, so it doesn't swing at me.
Yeah.
Walt could just cast Ram Through, target a 1/1 on my board, and have the 15 excess damage trample that would be dealt to the creature in a bite effect. That Ram Through then just boom, straight at my face.
Yep, it's definitely like won me games on the spot.
The art of this card is so good as well. It's like a ram,
great.
like just charging into a wall. It's so cool.
It's an Ikoria card, and it feels like an Ikoria card.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. If you're playing like a mill deck, where your goal is to mill everyone out. Like that's the way your deck is built. You know, maybe it's Bruvac, maybe it's Phoenix or something like that.
Maybe Scarab God.
Yeah, Scarab God even. I think you should still have at least a couple of those Command the Dread Horde or Rise of the Dark Realms style effects, because sometimes you're not going to be able to mill every single card in every single library, but milling 50 and then going, okay, Command the Dread Horde, take your 5 best creatures, your 5 best creatures, that's going to end the game.
I mean, even a card like Consuming Aberration, which wants more cards in your opponent's graveyards and does mill, can be an alternative win if you give that creature like an evasion, like flying or something like that.
Or
trample, or even just like sacrifice it and drain for X, where X is the power. Like,
it's that black fling spell.
I was thinking that one specifically. Really cool way of like playing around a player that's got like a Titan Shuffle in their deck or something.
Yep. So that's the main thing. Like reducing the length of the game yourself can just be reducing, like making the game end. That would do it. The other thing you can do to reduce that time, in my opinion, is you can actually sort of like consider your interactions with other players. I'm like preemptively saying, bear with me, James. I know you love talking to other players.
But like politics is such a good part of Commander. I had more votes on our Space Battle episode than I thought I would get. Thank you for everyone that voted for me in that episode.
I'm actually saying there's a way you can do that also speeds up the game.
I agree. I do agree.
Politics does sometimes say, like, pause the game, let's have a chat, let's make a deal. That, I say, would slow down the game a little bit, not a lot, but it can. There's another thing you can do, which is kind of politics, but also speeds up the game, which is especially for new players. Point out what you think the key threat is. And this is a great way to open up a political deal. You know, you can say, like, someone's taking a long time umming and ahhing about their turn, and you can be like, hey, I see you thinking about this turn right now. Do you have any way to get rid of that Ghostly Prison? Because you're going wide, I've got 10 creatures here, we're not going to kill this player unless that Ghostly Prison is gone. And if they can, you can be like, okay, cool, if you do that, I'll swing all my stuff at them next turn. Like, I'll
say thank you by beating them in the face.
Yeah, like, this is opening the door for a political deal.
And that might actually close out the game, because it removes a card like Ghostly Prison that reduces the ability for these people to win. It's actually, like, politics is incredible like this. Like, I think about things like the threat assessment scenario, and especially for new players where they don't know what the threat is.
Yeah.
In some scenarios, some players contributing and then some other players contributing their thoughts and they're contradictory can really confuse a new player or even any player. Like, for example, I could be like, hey, have you got any way to deal with that Ghostly Prison because I'm going wide? But then someone else chimes in and goes, yeah, but you're not going wide. You've got a completely different game strategy. That Ghostly Prison's good for you. And then I go, no, it's not good for you because of this. That player's then just got so much information buzzing around in their head that's confusing the hell out of them. I think there's a bit to say where sometimes letting the player kind of like really threat assess themselves and like, especially if like they're in the tank, for example.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a player that goes in the tank hardcore at the end of the game specifically.
Yeah. I think it's a balance for sure. I think with new players especially, it's sometimes good to just point out, like, I can see you want to do all this cool stuff with your deck. It's not going to work unless this thing is gone. That can be a good thing to point out. On the inverse of that, I would say, like, yeah, if someone's in the tank and they're just having a think and they're, like, counting damage, for instance.
Doing math?
Don't interrupt them.
Yeah.
Like, they know what they're doing. They have their plan laid out. They're making it happen in their head. That's totally fine. And I think especially, this is, like, it comes back to that game store etiquette that we talked about way back now on the podcast.
Good episode, if you want to go back and have a listen to that episode.
But one thing we specifically said was, like, if you're outside of a game of Magic, you can talk to the players who are in it if you really like to. Don't talk to the player whose turn it is.
We called it backseat gaming.
Yeah.
Which is just annoying if you're backseat driving. That's frustrating. Backseat gaming, more annoying.
Well, in this case, it's straight up going to slow down the game, right? Like, that player can't make game actions if they don't know what they're doing and if they're not talking about Magic at the time.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, right? Their turn can't go any faster if they're pausing it to talk to someone else.
But I think, the overall last statement of reducing the game length, I think, is think about how the social aspect of Commander, the politics, is affecting the game's length. Because if it's affecting it in a positive way that's following what the Space Commanders want, is reducing that ridiculous, like, 2-3 hour game, leave that politics in because it's going to help end the game. If that Ghostly Prison gets removed and 2 players get knocked out, fantastic.
Yeah.
Make that political deal. But if this political deal has resulted in you pulling out your laptop and writing up a document of contract, I think you're probably spending too long on this deal. Like,
I think you're probably right. I think the only other thing I would like to say about reducing the length of the game and just sort of strategies for getting to that ideal game length that we talked about. There's a couple of different apps out there now that have Commander clocks.
Yes, well, Game Nights Live now use the Commander clock app, which
is only on iOS, I think.
Yeah, Command Zone created it.
Yeah,
it's very similar to a Lifelinker app in terms of aesthetics.
Yeah.
But it basically functions as a chess clock. If you've ever seen a competitive chess game happen, you start your opponent's clock. They have a certain amount of time that you set. Usually for Game Nights Live, I think they set it at 25 minutes each.
Maybe 20 or something, yeah.
I think it's around that, but like 25 minutes. But basically the idea is that clock is how much time that you have priority in the game, which is 25 minutes, for example, let's say. So that gets us to like that hour and 20 minute, roughly that mark, depending on if you add time or take time off. But then when you're done with your turn, you pass it to the next person and start their clock.
Yeah.
And their clock starts their clock starts ticking down. So everyone has their own little clock, but you can also play it where when you have priority, you pass it.
Yeah. So if someone's like, oh, hold up a sec with that spell on the stack. If it's your turn, James, and I want to respond, you might pause your clock and I might start mine and go like, okay, I need a second to think about this.
And I want to interact in this way and I have to explain what card I'm casting.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
The important thing is each player has a certain amount of time, and that's just their time in the game. So during their turn or during other people's turns when they have priority, it's the time that they're making actions. And importantly, it keeps everyone to task, right? It's going like, you've got a certain amount of time, you can use it however you like, but you've only got so much of it.
And I haven't personally experienced the Commander clock yet. I would actually like to invite you, Walt, let's have a game of Commander with some friends and let's try this clock out.
I'm keen because I actually have an app that I've been using recently for my life counter called Life Tap.
Is this the one that has the cool backgrounds?
Yeah, you can set backgrounds based on card art, which is really cool. You can also choose like any color you want. You can choose combinations of colors. It does like everything you'd ever dream of. When you tick down someone's commander damage, it subtracts it from your life total. So many cool features. But one of them is when you're setting up the game, you can set a commander clock. And that's so you can set it so that whenever it's someone's turn, it's counting down. The only thing I don't like about it, it only has certain amounts of time. Like it's got set amounts you can set it to.
You can't do a custom ranges?
You can't do a custom one. No. And they have a 15-minute clock. And then I think the next one is 30 minutes. And I'm like, I feel like
the difference between 15 and 30 for a player, like individual player, that's a lot of time.
Well, and if we were to break up that ideal range we were talking about of 60 to 80 minutes.
Well, 15 minutes per player is an hour.
It is an hour. But both of us said maybe it can go closer to 90 or 80 minutes. That would be like 20 minutes each, which would be perfect. So that's my only downside.
Half an hour is like 2 hours.
Yeah, you don't want half an hour. No, I think it's 15 minutes or 20 is probably what you're going for. But yeah, my thinking is probably 20 is better. So
I'm curious. I would like to try a Commander chess clock type situation and see if it affects the speed of the game or... Because I found when we've played on Spell Table before, you've done the thing where you've looked at because when you pass the turn on Spell Table, it just starts counting up. How long it's been your turn.
Your turn has been.
And I've noticed that you, more than most players, you'll look at that time and you'll go, oh, sorry, I've already taken 7 minutes on this turn. I'll do this, and then pass.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, thanks, Walt. You've like made your turn more efficient. Like,
yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. All right, we'll try it soon.
We should. Well, we all love a grindy, well-earned win in Commander, or even a loss, but we should consider other players' time when we build our decks and when we pilot them. There is an optimal game length, and taking steps to bring yourself closer to that length will be better for yourself and the people you play with. This is the best way to play as many Commander games as possible, which is what it's all about. So, Space Commanders,
command received. Wow, we did it in under an hour. On brand.
They inspired us, I think.
Efficient episode.
Well, listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What's the optimal game length to you? And what steps do you take to bring yourself closer to that optimal game length? Do you have a Commander clock? Are you keeping yourself to task in some other way? We want to hear about it.
Have you just removed the Cathar's Crusade from your token stack? I hope you have.
That'll make a big difference.
Look, if you want to talk to us about this episode or about any Commander-related stuff, there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us. You can send us an email, you can add us on Twitter, or the best place to chat with us and the rest of our play group and other members of the community of Get Commanded Commanded is in our Discord. Now, that link is in the show notes, so you can go down and click that and join the ever-growing conversation that is in our Discord server.
Absolutely. If there's one other thing we can ask you to do, or maybe a couple other things, one of them is to please tell your friends about Get Commanded. We definitely want to reach as many Commander players as possible, so if you got someone out there who's new to the game, we feel like we're pretty beginner-friendly, let them know. There's a couple of guys in Melbourne, Australia, who have a few tips that might help them out.
Yeah, and if you're like Australian and want to support Australian content creators, the only way we're going to grow is if you tell your playgroup about us. And something I've noticed recently with content creation in general is everyone's doing some different stuff around content. Like a lot of people making gameplay content, a lot of people are making deck building tutorials and stuff like that.
Yep.
We just talked for an hour about game length. I think what we're doing here is really interesting, and if you really like us, please share us. And if you really want to support what we're doing, there is no better way to do it than with our Patreon page. It's linked in the show notes. You can get a bunch of different support from Walt and I on deck building advice. You can play monthly games with us. I've just actually scheduled in one of our patrons upcoming, so we get to play with them soon. And we would like to personally thank Fletcher Cutting for supporting us in the Space Commander tier. Fletch, you're the best.
It's true. We'd also like to thank again Palms Off Gaming, who sponsor this podcast. They make some really fantastic deck boxes, sleeves, binders, basically anything you ever need except the cards. They have you covered. So you can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au.
All right, well, it's tradition. Let's planeswalk out of here.
Yes, planeswalk into something not magic related.
Yeah,
sure.
We're going to planeswalk to a basement concert venue in the heart of Melbourne.
Ooh.
About 2 weeks ago now.
Okay, it's very specific.
But it was where I saw In Heart's Wake perform just recently.
Oh.
I know you don't know him because I know you don't listen to this type of music. But In Heart's Wake...
Tell us all about it.
In Heart's Wake have been one of my favourite local Australian metalcore bands for the past genuinely 10 years. And I know it's been 10 years because the show they played was the 10-year anniversary of their debut album.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Huge milestone.
More huge was I was at the album launch for that very album.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, what a trip. So you went to the 10-year anniversary concert?
So I was at the album launch, and just a couple of weeks ago I went to the 10-year anniversary album celebration, and they played the entire album from top to bottom and then some extra songs. It was awesome. It was so much fun. And all the people there were all my age as well. There were people that have grown up with the band. Not a lot of new listeners, which was kind of nice in a weird way because I was like, oh, you guys really have known the band's journey.
You know what we're talking about, yeah.
For example, there's a song called Survival, and in the song they sample, in Halo when you I'm talking Halo 2 here, real old Halo.
Yeah.
You know when you get a kill streak, and it goes killing frenzy.
Yes.
You know that they sampled that in the song right before the breakdown.
Wow.
So with the whole crowd, and keep in mind, metal concerts, you have a mosh pit. So people are dancing intense and throwing and pushing each other around. So just before the breakdown, it's dun 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 dun, and then it goes killing frenzy, and then it's dun dun dun, really heavy music.
Yeah.
But the whole place, and keep in mind, this basement venue, they used to play... I saw their album launch at a surf shop. They played for 35 to 50 people, I reckon. That was how many people they played for.
Yeah.
This venue probably holds, I reckon, maybe 300 people, maybe a little bit.
Okay, when you said basement, I was picturing small again.
No, it was it's it used to be the Hi-Fi. I can't remember what it's called now. Max Watts, I think it's renamed to.
Sure.
Cool venue, but it's got a balcony and stuff where some people can sit and have a listen. But the pit was big. It was pretty intense, and the whole place just yelled killing frenzy, and it was just so good. They had a guy with a Master Chief helmet on stage.
Oh, sweet.
It was really you could tell they wrote that album when they were in their early 20s, late teens, because they were referencing Halo.
That's so fun.
Super cool concert. And genuinely, if you're a fan, I know a couple of the listeners are actually metal fans because I've met some of you in person. If you've not checked out In Heart's Wake, they're from Byron Bay. They're a sick group. Go check them out. They're incredible. Highly recommend Divination. That's their first album.
Yep.
But I also recommend the new album Kailugia, and Sky Dancer is another really good album.
Cool.
Check them out.
Definitely. Well, that's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.